Hello, boxing fans around the world. Thank you once again for joining us on Talking Fight for another episode on the Olympics coming to Tokyo this July, featuring Christian from the Friday night panel. What do you got for us today, Christian?
Well, Graham, we got a couple of updates since the weekend on a couple of stories that we've been following. So we're going to start today with Mandy Bujold, our local boxer here. Well, not that local. She's down the road in Kitchener, and we're in Toronto, but Canadian all the same. Well, Mandy plans to take her fight for a berth at the Tokyo Olympics to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Bujold and her lawyer, Sylvie Rodrigo, who we talked about a little bit last week, had petitioned the International Olympic Committee for a berth based on her pregnancy and maternity leave and had hoped for a decision by this past Friday. But Bujold said in an email, "We are disappointed and quite frankly surprised that neither the IOC nor the Olympic Boxing Task Force have yet responded." Now, this is to the letter sent by her lawyer on the 23rd of April. She continued saying, "They have not reached out yet to indicate if they are planning to rectify the qualifying rules to accommodate female athletes who are pregnant or postpartum during the chosen qualifying period for Tokyo." On Saturday, Bujold told CBC Sports that she has heard from the IOC and expects a decision to her petition hopefully by Tuesday. After a competitive year wiped out by the global pandemic, the 11-time national flyweight champion had been confident that she'd clinch a berth at the Olympic qualifying tournament that was supposed to be taking place in May in Buenos Aires, or this month, I guess now in Buenos Aires. But as we all know, the event was recently canceled due to climbing COVID-19 case numbers in Argentina. She went on to say, should we not hear anything at all by Tuesday, we will have no choice but to pursue a discrimination legal challenge before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. We are also exploring other legal avenues. Now, Bujold is a two-time Pan-American Games champion and would be the first female to box for Canada at two consecutive Olympics. That's if she is able to secure a berth. Now, an illness derailed her dreams at the 2016 Rio Games just hours before her quarterfinal loss to China's Ren Can. She was ill in hospital and on an IV drip and eventually had to settle for fifth place. So, hopefully she hears something by end of day today from the IOC or from the boxing task force as to whether or not she's going to need to pursue further legal action on this particular one. But again, we talked about this last week, Graham, and I see the IOC dragging their heels on this one. And whether we see some kind of meaningful change come later on down the road, hard to say. But sadly, I would be surprised if we got to see Mandy box at this Olympics. Oh, yep. Carl's noticed, yeah. And yes, Carl, that is an England shirt with your one star. Earned back in the 60s, I believe. But before we get sidetracked and on to footy, let's stick with the games for now. Because following up on another story that we had been covering last week, organizers of the Tokyo Olympics have now sparked anger in Japan's medical community after having asked for 500 nurses to volunteer for this summer's games. Now, as you know, the request came as the International Olympic Committee and organizers press ahead with plans to hold the games, even as the coronavirus pandemic continues to worsen in the host nation, and amid warnings that the event could place an intolerable strain on exhausted healthcare workers. Medical staff in Tokyo and other areas where cases are surging say that their professional focus must remain on coronavirus patients and people with other illnesses who have had their treatments delayed due to the virus. Olympic officials are currently saying that 10,000 medical workers will be needed during the games, which, as we know, are going to be held during the hottest part of the year. But the recent request to the Japanese Nursing Association to send 500 of its members to Tokyo 2020 was met with a wave of anger on social media from nurses who said that they were frankly too busy to devote their time to the Olympics. Now, in a tweet by a local federation of medical unions outlining its opposition to performing Olympic duties, has now received hundreds of thousands of retweets over the last couple of days. The Secretary General of Japan's Federation of Medical Workers Unions, Susumu Morita, said that the pandemic should take priority, saying, "We must stop the proposal to send nurses who are engaged in a fight against a serious coronavirus pandemic to volunteer at the Olympics. I am furious at the insistence on staging the Olympics despite the risk to patients and nurses' health and lives." Now, although medical workers were the first group in Japan to start receiving vaccines mid-February as the first part of the rollout, many have yet to be given their first jab, Morita said. Unprotected medical staff fear contracting the virus while treating patients or administering vaccines. Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga provoked dismay when he suggested that nurses who had stopped working, including those suffering from stress and exhaustion, could be enlisted for Tokyo 2020, saying, "I hear many are taking time off, and it should be possible." And while Suga repeats the claims by the IOC and organizers that it will be possible to put on a, quote, safe and secure Olympics in 81 days' time, medical experts are increasingly skeptical. And by the sounds of it, so is Carl over in across in the UK as well. So obviously medical professionals are going to be needed at the games for a host of different reasons. Part of that is going to be monitoring the coronavirus situation directly, and part of that is obviously going to be you're never going to see an Olympic Games that doesn't have an injury. You know, we talk about combat sports, but, you know, gymnasts come down off the bar, cyclists crash. And fourth, you know, we need first responders. We're going to need medical personnel on hand at the Olympics, and that's a no-brainer. But at the same time, you can see the other side of that going, guys, we're busy. Our hands are tied over here. We're dealing with this pandemic. We can't take the time to travel into Tokyo, find accommodation, and then volunteer our time on top of that. So if the games end up going forward, we may see them expanding that volunteer list that they are allowing into Japan to include medical professionals. Because they've already talked about including about 500 people, but those weren't specifically nurses. But there are including approximately 500 people from outside of Japan who are coming in under special visas for the Tokyo Olympics, because they do have specialized talents or experience that are going to be integral to the running of the games. So if it goes ahead, we may see those numbers expanded and a call go out to healthcare professionals who are able to spare the time. We'll see.
I'm 100% confident.
Yeah, Carl here is asking what our confidence is as to whether or not these games are going to go ahead. And I'm with Graham on this one. I think that we are going to see an Olympic Games. What they're going to look like, that waits to be seen. But I think we won't beat this one to death because we've done it a few times now. But there's too much money. Human life and the contracts. Unfortunately, this isn't a scale where we're going to try to find a balance here, because the people who are worried about the contracts and the money are not worried about the coronavirus. They're hell or high water trying to figure out, how can we hold this game? How can we recoup our losses? And how can we still make as much money as possible? And that's who's in charge of running these games, not the medical experts. So I'm with you on this one, Graham. I think 100% we're going to see a games go forward.
You know what it kind of reminds me of, and this is an oblique example over here on the left, but I'll give an example. When a major sports organization wants to build a new stadium in any city, what do? They go to the municipal government, any level of government, and say, we need help to build this stadium. And the people who are not interested in sports go, why the heck should our government public money be put towards the building of this new stadium? And what happens? 9 times out of 10, if not 90, especially when it comes to the Olympics, what happens? The stadiums get built, with public money, because there is tremendous benefit to the community at large in having these events take place. So, as you say, hell or high water. And with
the stadium front, they've already lost a pile of money in Tokyo, because their first designs, they got halfway through building and had to scrap and then start a whole new stadium. So on specifically the stadium front, they're already millions in debt on that one.
Right. And all I'm saying is there's a lot of money involved here. Mm-hmm. So to your point about hell or high water, they will have these Olympic Games. I guarantee it. 100%, Carl. They're coming. And realistically, the people who are complaining, go ahead, complain all you want, but these Olympic Games are going to go forward.
I think we might see a couple of events that can be relocated within Japan, possibly do get relocated outside of the Tokyo metropolitan area and away from Osaka, perhaps. For example, they've already moved the marathon up to Hokkaido, which is the northern island of Japan, which puts it 500 miles away from the actual Olympic Stadium. And that's because it was deemed unsafe to have that many runners running through the streets of Tokyo given the current situation. So we might see something like a boxing tournament. If we're not having fans, this can happen in any community center around Japan, really. So we may see some sports start to get relocated, but I don't see a full cancellation at this point in time.
Did you have a chance to blast through the playbook that came out last week?
Again, there are a few changes going in there, and we're going to have to devote an entire episode to that because the original playbook was about 30 pages long, and this one's about 70. So we are getting into deeper into the specifics. The reason we haven't dove too deeply into it as of yet is because this is a lot of general information yet. We're actually not for another couple of weeks expecting sport specific. So we'll be able to take a look at, for example, some of the larger problems that are going to be facing the Olympics and what are, all the Olympians are going to have to go through. But as far as what's going to be specifically, our boxers are going to be going through that we don't have that information yet, as that's going to be won't be published for another couple of weeks yet, the sport specifics. But we will definitely be looking, especially once we have some sport specific stuff to report on. But talking boxing though, and talking sports specific, and the fact that these games are still happening, national teams are ramping up their training efforts. So I thought I would take a quick look as well at our friends down in Ghana, as it's been a while since we've checked in on them. So the Ghanaian national boxing team, the Black Bombers, have raised the tempo of their preparations for the Olympic Games. They've upped that to a new level, they're saying, as they've moved now into the residential camp at the Golden Beach Resort under strict monitoring and evaluation by the Ghanaian Boxing Federation. They now train at the Bukom Boxing Arena inside the Trust Sports Emporium a couple of times a day, with a morning session and an afternoon session starting around 3. Other major considerations for the team is mainly, are all going to focus around safety of the boxers and their controlled movement to stop any possible COVID-19 infections. Captain Suleiman Teta, a flyweight and 2012 Olympian, says that he's happy that they've moved to the camp at this point in time. Featherweight Samuel Takye also said it's good that they're now in a different frame of mind as well as a new setting, meaning that they're getting ready for the games because they're coming up. Shakul Samir is a light heavyweight, and he thinks that they're going to be bringing a big surprise. Samir, who's the last of them to qualify, did so on the global ranking system and used his bronze medal winning performance at the African Games to cinch his spot for Tokyo. And once he does step into the ring, Shakul will seal the status of his family as an Olympic family, as having 3 Olympians, as both of his elder brothers, Basti and Issa Samir, are both 2008 Olympians from back in the Beijing Games. Now, on top of those, there's also 2 more boxers from Ghana hoping to make it into the games once the final rankings are released. Female boxer Dr. Ornella Sathoun, who's a specialist in analytical chemistry, is hoping to be Ghana's first female to make it to the Olympics. And Jessie Larde, 2018 Commonwealth Games bronze medalist. Ghana's amateur boxing team, the Black Bombers, as well as other qualified athletes, are going to be spending 4 weeks in Japan's Eastern Pacific coastal city of Inowashiro before starting their campaign at the Tokyo Olympic Games. So the Ghanaian national team is ramping up their efforts as they get a little closer to the games, hoping to qualify another couple once the final rankings come out, but they're definitely sending at least those 3, and they'll definitely be ones to watch out for at the games.
Well done. Go Ghana, go.
Oh yeah, you still got your Team Ghana shirts at home somewhere?
Somewhere, yes. They're underneath my Team England shirts, which are underneath my Team Canada shirts.
Well, they're all football, So,
Uh,
but
good
those are the
memories.
updates for this. Those are the updates from the weekend that we missed
Right.
out on
Thanks
over
very
the
much. Yeah,
weekend, Brad.
appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah. It just Ghana, given the whole spectrum of African nations. I mean, if you take a look this weekend, there was a professional card over in Egypt, up in Egypt. So the Africans are well into the sport of boxing, and I'm pretty sure, Ghana's, if they're prepared to send 3 fighters and have them spend 4 weeks prior to the Olympics in Japan, that has to be on the radar of all these other nations as well. So yeah, are the Olympic Games going forward? Absolutely. Why? Because everyone has a contingency, and they're acting on it.
Absolutely, and we see other teams like the Filipino national team. They're not in the Philippines right now. They're already in training camp in Thailand, and they'll be going directly from Thailand to Tokyo. So they'll be going from Bangkok to Tokyo. So they're not even going to get a chance to go home between now and the games. So because they are keeping these bubbles as tight, these national Olympic committees are trying to keep these bubbles as tight as possible so that we don't see outbreaks like we have seen in the Indian national side. Now,
Right.
obviously, things going on in India are obviously a lot more dire than a lot of other places in the world, so it shouldn't be terribly surprising that we're seeing outbreaks there. But, they've been trying to keep these bubbles as tight as possible, especially for these athletes who have qualified to the games, to have that taken away from you last minute as we get closer and closer to the games. The paranoia is going to be ramped up. You're going to see these bubbles start getting a lot tighter, restrictions going up,
Right.
self-imposed, as well as the actual National Olympic Committees imposing travel and restrictions on their athletes in order to ensure that they are going to have healthy athletes going into Tokyo.
Yeah, agreed. Right on. Okay. Thanks very much, Christian. Appreciate your update, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, Carl.
We'll chat